So in tutorial 5, we'll be looking at the impacts of climate change on changes to agriculture, including crop yields, limits of cultivation, and soil erosion. The first thing I want to sort of point out here is in this graphic, which takes into account emission pledges and warming up to 2100, you can see that across these staples, and staples being kind of the main human-based foods and crops, they're all showing significant levels of decline. So here's percentage yields falling here from a base level down to -40, -60 in the case of some staples. Red here, US maize. So significant impacts on these staples. But I think it's fair to say that the spatial distribution of yields is going to vary significantly. So in this map, we can see a baseline of 1970 to 2000 and leading to change by 2080 based on an emission scenario. We won't get into that. But what we can see here, for example, in blue, if we look at Brazil, you're seeing positive gains in yields. Most of Africa seeing significant losses, gains in Europe, and North America seeing marginal losses. So a different outlook, a different spatial pattern of gains in some places and losses in others. So if we have a look at that a little bit more closely, we can actually, let's zoom in here at Brazil, and it talks about soya crop could slump by more than 20%. So this is looking at projections for, I think, 2050. But at the same time, across Latin America, potatoes and quinoa crops could grow better. So we see this difference across different crops. The US is going to see increased disturbances, atmospheric disturbances, droughts, heavy rains. That's going to have an impact on food production. And across California, wheat, tomato, rice, cotton, and maize all expected to lose out. There's issues in Australia. So a 15% drop in rainfall. Of course, this is going to put food under stress. And China experiencing major food supply insufficiencies by 2030. So a lot of regions experiencing stress. Now that might mean within countries that you get a shift in production. So in this graphic, we can see that areas in red are going to see a decline in soya production, but areas in green experiencing more positive yields. So the crop in this case sees decline, but yet sees growth in other areas as it shifts northwards with climate change. And in this particular graphic here, we can see the impact on Australia in terms of its wheat production. So between 1990 and 2015, production in wheat has already seen falls in Australia, a 50% fall in that 25-year period. So quite significant impacts on wheat production already being experienced. And that's one sign of kind of shifting climatic zones. So there's a few things that we can take away from this. I think this is really quite important. So until about 2030, global warming is expected to lead to both gains and losses in the productivities of crops and livestock, fisheries and forestry. And that will depend on specific places, the environmental conditions they're experiencing and the types of crops that they're farming. But beyond 2030, the negative impacts of climate change on agricultural yields will become increasingly severe in all regions. And finally, in tropical developing regions, these adverse impacts are already affecting the livelihoods and food security of vulnerable households and communities. And the issue that we've got here is, unfortunately, based on the emissions that we've already put into our atmosphere, this is inevitable. We're locked to this kind of scenario already. So no doubt we're going to experience significant falls in yields in different places of the world. And finally, we take a look at this graphic here. So it's based on a 1.5 degree increase. And even at that 1.5 degree level, we're going to pose significant risks to human well-being and in terms of agriculture, in terms of sort of soil health So we've got this scale here of moderate, high, very high. And this is the 1.5 degree level across here, the pink arrow. And as you can see, with a 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario, we're going to have significant, well, moderate risks. In red, high risks. So moderate to high risks, dryland water scarcity, soil erosion increasing, vegetation loss, wildfire damages seeming to be more of a problem, as well as permafrost degradation. I think what we see here with tropical crop yield declines, well, it's yellow from well below, so they're already experiencing problems in tropical regions, and that's something to highlight. And all of this is leading to food supply instabilities, food insecurity issues. So there we go.